How much of your life, your energy, your confidence, your peace are you giving away to stress every single day? Not because life is unbearable, not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to react. Here's the truth most people never hear. Stress is not something that happens to you. It's something you do. Two people face the same problem. One panics. The other stays calm, focused, in control. The difference isn't intelligence, luck, or strength. It's this. One has learned to act as if nothing stresses them, and that act has become their power. Let me take you somewhere important for a moment, because if you truly get this, if it lands not just in your mind but in your body, your entire relationship with stress will change. Most people believe stress comes from what's happening around them. The deadline, the bill, the argument, the uncertainty. They say anyone would be stressed in my situation. And that belief feels reasonable, logical, justified. But it's also the very belief that keeps them trapped. Because stress does not come from events. It comes from the meaning you assign to events. Think about it. If events alone created stress, then every human on the planet would respond the same way to the same situation. But they don't. One person sees a problem and feels crushed. Another sees the same problem and feels challenged, even energized. Same event. Completely different emotional state. Why? Because emotion follows interpretation, not circumstance. You don't feel stressed because something happened. You feel stressed because of what you decided it meant. Maybe you decided it meant you're losing control. Maybe you decided it meant you're not enough. Maybe you decided it meant something bad is coming and you won't be able to handle it. That decision often happens so fast, so automatically, that you don't even realize you made it, but make no mistake, you did. Here's what most people never notice. The moment stress hits, it's not neutral, it's personal. Stress always says something about you, about your safety, your identity, your future, and the instant you buy into that story, your body follows the command. Your shoulders tighten, your breathing gets shallow, your focus narrows, your nervous system shifts into survival mode, not because you're in danger, but because you believe you are. Now let me flip this for you. If stress is created by interpretation, then stress can be dismantled by interpretation. And that means something extraordinary. You are not at the mercy of your environment. You are in a relationship with it, and you get to choose how you show up. Powerful people don't have fewer problems. They have fewer meanings that weaken them. They don't ask, why is this happening to me? They ask, what does this require of me right now? They don't say, this is overwhelming. They say, this is demanding, and I can meet demands. Notice the difference. One meaning collapses your state. The other sharpens it. And here's the part that changes everything. You don't need to believe a new interpretation for it to work. You only need to act from it, because your brain takes cues from your behavior. When you act as if something is manageable, your nervous system begins to calm. When you act as if you're capable, your focus expands. When you act as if you're grounded, your physiology follows. Action comes first. Emotion follows second. This is why learning to act as if nothing stresses you is not denial. It's leadership. It's you deciding that stress doesn't get to be the authority in your life anymore. Let me be clear. Acting unstressed doesn't mean pretending nothing matters. It means refusing to interpret pressure as danger. It means choosing a meaning that gives you access to your best self instead of your weakest patterns. Pressure can mean I'm under attack, or it can mean I'm being called forward. Same pressure, different meaning, completely different result. Most people don't realize this, but the moment they label something as stressful, they've already given it power. They've already told their body we're losing. And the body obeys every time. But when you pause, even for a second, and you change the meaning, everything shifts. Your breathing changes, your posture changes, your tone changes, and suddenly you're no longer reacting, you're responding. That's the moment you take your power back. You stop fighting life, you stop bracing for impact, you stop living like everything is a threat, and you start moving like someone who trusts themselves. Because at the deepest level, stress isn't about what's happening out there. It's about whether you trust your ability to handle whatever comes next. When you change that belief, stress loses its grip. And when you choose your meaning, you choose your state. And that choice is where real control begins. Now let's go deeper, because even if you understand that stress comes from interpretation, there's another layer that determines whether that understanding actually changes your life or stays as an idea you nod at and forget. This is where most people get stuck. They try to think their way out of stress while their body is still screaming danger, and the body always wins that battle. Here's the truth. Your mind does not control your body nearly as much as your body controls your mind. Before a single thought fully forms, your physiology has already shifted. Your breathing has changed. Your posture has collapsed or tightened. Your muscles have braced. Your nervous system has decided whether you're safe or under threat. And once that happens, your brain's job becomes simple. It finds thoughts that match the state you're in. That's why when you're slouched, breathing shallow, staring at the floor, your mind automatically goes to doubt, fear, and overwhelm. And when you're upright, breathing fully, moving with intention, your mind starts producing solutions, confidence, and clarity. Same brain, different body, completely different psychology. Most people don't realize they are constantly telling their nervous system a story through their body language. They say they want peace, but they sit like they're under attack. They say they want confidence, but they move like they're trying to disappear. They say they want control, but they breathe like they're running out of time. And the body believes what you do, not what you say. Stress is not just a mental experience, it's a physical one. And if you want to master stress, you must learn to command your physiology before you try to reason with your thoughts. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. The moment pressure shows up, most people unconsciously freeze or collapse. Their chest tightens, their shoulders rise, their breath shortens, their movement becomes rigid or withdrawn. That physical pattern sends one clear signal, the brain, we're not okay. And once that signal is sent, the brain floods the system with stress chemicals to help you survive. But survival is not the same as performance. Survival narrows your focus. It kills creativity. It shuts down long-term thinking. It makes small problems feel massive. Now here's the shift that changes everything. When you change your physiology deliberately, you interrupt that entire chain reaction. You don't wait to feel calm. You move in a way that creates calm. You don't wait for confidence. You adopt the posture, breath, and movement of someone who is certain, because certainty is not a feeling first. It's a physical state. Powerful people understand this intuitively. When pressure rises, they don't shrink. They expand. They slow their breathing. They ground their feet. They lift their gaze. They take up space, not to impress anyone, but to regulate themselves. And the moment they do, their nervous system gets a new message. I've got this. That message alone changes everything. Your heart rate stabilizes. Your breath deepens. Your mind clears. Your voice steadies. Nothing outside has changed, but inside, you've shifted from reaction to command. This is why acting as if nothing stresses you is not pretending. It's training. It's conditioning your nervous system to stay resourceful under pressure. Think about athletes, performers, leaders under fire. Do you think they wait until they feel calm to perform? Of course not. They move RST. They breathe first. They adopt a physical ritual that tells the body it's time. You can do the same thing in everyday moments. Before a difficult conversation, during uncertainty, when things don't go your way, the moment you feel stress rising, that's your cue to take control of your body, stand taller, breathe deeper, slow your movements, relax your face, lower your shoulders. These are not small things. These are commands to your nervous system. And here's what most people miss. Consistency rewires identity. When you repeatedly shift your physiology under pressure, your brain starts associating challenge with control instead of panic. Stress no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a signal to step into a powerful state. Over time, something remarkable happens. You stop needing to act calm. Calm becomes familiar. Grounded becomes normal. Pressure stops hijacking you because your body no longer interprets it as danger. This is how emotional mastery is built, not through positive thinking, but through physical leadership. Your body is the fastest way to change your state. Always has been, always will be. And when you learn to command it, stress loses its ability to run your life because the person who controls their physiology controls their psychology. And that control is real power. Now here's where everything begins to come together. Because once you understand that stress is created by meaning, and once you learn to shift your physiology, there's still one belief that keeps people stuck. It's the belief that calm is something you either have or you don't. That some people are just naturally unbothered, naturally confident, naturally steady under pressure, and others are just wired to stress. That belief is a lie. Calm is not a personality trait. Control is not a genetic gift. Being unshaken is not something you're born with. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered. Most people think acting calm means being fake. They say, I don't want to, pretend I'm okay when I'm not. But acting calm is not about denying reality. It's about choosing leadership over impulse. It's about deciding that your emotional reactions don't get to run the show. Think about the first time you ever did anything important. You weren't confident. You acted confident. You didn't feel ready. You acted ready. And through that action, confidence eventually showed up. The same is true here. You don't wait to feel unstressed. You practice being unstressed. And practice is the key word. When people see someone who stays composed under pressure, they assume it's effortless. What they don't see are the thousands of small repetitions that train that response. Every time that person chose not to panic, every time they slowed their breath instead of feeding fear, every time they responded instead of reacted. That's not talent. That's training. Your nervous system is constantly learning from what you do. If every time stress shows up, you tense, rush, complain, or collapse, your body learns. This is how we handle pressure. But if you consistently choose steadiness, your body learns a new pattern. At first, acting calm will feel unnatural. That's not a sign it's wrong. That's a sign it's new. Growth always feels awkward before it feels normal. The mistake people make is they interpret discomfort as inauthenticity, when in reality, it's just unfamiliarity. Here's the truth. Authenticity is not about expressing every emotion you feel. It's about expressing the version of yourself you are committed to becoming. If you're committed to being powerful, grounded, and clear under pressure, then acting that way, even before it feels natural, is not fake. It's alignment. This is how identity changes. Every time you act calm when you could have panicked, you cast a vote for a new self-image. Every time you stay composed when old habits wanted to take over, you reinforce a new standard. Over time, those votes add up. And one day you look back and realize you don't get stressed the way you used to. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. Most people underestimate how quickly this can change. They think transformation requires years of therapy or some dramatic breakthrough. In reality, it requires deliberate repetition, small moments, daily choices. A difficult email arrives. You pause, you breathe, you respond slowly and clearly. That's a conversation gets tense. You keep your tone steady. You listen instead of defending. That's a rep. Something doesn't go according to plan. You don't complain, you adapt. That's a rep. Those reps are shaping you whether you realize it or not. And here's the most empowering part. You don't need to eliminate stress to master it. Stress becomes the training ground. Pressure becomes the gym. Every challenge is an opportunity to practice being the person who doesn't get shaken. When you start viewing stress this way, it loses its emotional charge. It's no longer an enemy, it's feedback. It's a signal reminding you to step into the skill you're developing. And as that skill strengthens, something subtle but profound happens. People around you start responding differently. They trust you more. They feel calmer around you. They look to you for direction, not because you're louder, but because you're steadier. That's leadership. Not control through force, but through presence. And presence is something you build. You build it by choosing how you act, especially when it's hard. You build it by refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent behavior. You build it by practicing calm until calm becomes your baseline, because the person who looks unshaken under pressure is not special. They're trained, and you can train this too, starting now. Now let's talk about the shift that separates people who manage stress from people who are mastered by it. This is where real authority is born, because no matter how skilled you become at reframing, meaning no matter how strong your physiology is, none of it matters if you're trying to control the world before you've learned to control your state. Most people get this backwards. They say, once things calm down, I'll calm down. Once they change, I'll feel better. Once I have more certainty, then I'll be at peace. And in doing that, they hand their emotional life over to circumstances they don't control. Here's the truth. You will never control everything that happens around you. Life is not designed that way. There will always be uncertainty, pressure, people who disappoint you, plans that fall apart. If your emotional stability depends on those things behaving, you will live in reaction for the rest of your life. Emotional mastery doesn't come from controlling the environment. It comes from controlling your internal state. First, this is what powerful people understand instinctively. They don't wait for calm conditions to feel calm. They decide their state and then they act from it. They lead themselves before they try to lead anything else. Think about it. In moments of chaos, who do people look to? Not the smartest person in the room, not the loudest. They look to the one who is grounded, the one who isn't emotionally hijacked, the one who can hold their center when everyone else is losing theirs. That person has influence before they say a word. Why? Because emotional states are contagious. Panic spreads. So does anxiety ripples outward. So does calm. When you're not in control of your state, you don't just suffer. You transmit instability to everyone around you. But when you are centered, you become a stabilizing force. Now here's the challenge. Mastering your state doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It doesn't mean pretending you don't feel pressure. It means you feel it without being run by it. You allow the sensation, but you choose the direction. There's a massive difference between feeling emotion and obeying it. Most people confuse the two. They feel fear and assume they must act afraid. They feel stress and assume they must rush, snap, or shut down. But emotion is information, not instruction. It's a signal, not a command. The moment you recognize that, you step into leadership. You can say, I feel pressure and I'm choosing clarity. I feel uncertainty and I'm choosing focus. I feel intensity and I'm choosing presence. This is where internal control becomes real. And here's what's powerful. Once you can command your state, external control becomes easier. Conversations go better, decisions become clearer, problems feel more manageable. Not because life changed, but because you're no longer fighting yourself while facing it. People who lack emotional mastery exhaust themselves. They argue with reality. They resist what is. They burn energy reacting instead of directing. But when you control your state first, you conserve power. You respond strategically instead of emotionally. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. And this skill compounds. The more you practice choosing your state, the faster you recover when something throws you off. You stop spiraling. You stop carrying stress from one moment into the next. You handle what's in front of you, then you let it go. That's freedom. Most people don't realize how much of their stress is recycled. They relive the same moment over and over in their mind. They drag yesterday's tension into today's conversations. They bring tomorrow's worries into the present. Emotional mastery ends that cycle. You deal with what's real right now from a powerful state and nothing more. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to control everything outside, you actually gain more influence. People sense that you're not reactive. They feel safe around you. They listen. They cooperate because certainty without force is magnetic. This is why learning to act as if nothing stresses you isn't about acting tough. It's about acting sovereign. It's about deciding that your inner world is your responsibility and no one else gets to dictate it. When you control your state, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your clarity. And from that place, everything else becomes manageable. Now, this is where it all becomes real, because knowing all of this means nothing if you wait for the right mood, the right feeling, or the right moment to show up. The people who truly master stress don't wait to feel powerful. They decide to powerful. And that decision comes first, always. Most people are living at the mercy of their emotional weather. If they feel motivated, they act. If they feel calm, they perform. If they feel confident, they speak up. And when those feelings aren't there, they stall, hesitate, and explain it away by saying, that's just how I feel right now. But here's the hard truth. Feelings are followers, not leaders. If you wait for your emotional state to change before you take action, you give up control. You become reactive. You let circumstances set the tone for your life. Powerful people don't do that. They understand something. Most people never practice your state as a choice before it's a feeling. They decide how they're going to show up regardless of what's happening around them. Pressure rises. They decide to slow down. Chaos hits. They decide to get clear. Uncertainty shows up. They decide to stay grounded, not because it's easy, but because it's effective. This is what it means to decide your state. It's an internal command, a line you draw within yourself that says, no matter what's happening outside, this is how I move. And once you make that decision, your body and mind organize around it. Think about moments in your life when you had to rise, when someone depended on you, when there was no room to fall apart. You didn't wait to feel ready, you stepped up. And in stepping up, strength appeared, calm appeared, focus appeared. That wasn't luck, that was decision. Most people underestimate how much power they have simply because they've never practiced deciding their state consistently. They let stress decide for them. They let urgency dictate their pace. They let fear shape their tone. But the moment you decide your state, you flip the hierarchy. You move from reaction to command. And here's the key. Deciding your state doesn't mean you won't feel stress. It means stress doesn't get a vote. You might feel tension in your chest, but you decide to breathe deeply anyway. You might feel pressure, but you decide to speak slowly and clearly. You might feel doubt, but you decide to move forward with certainty. That's not suppression. That's leadership. And leadership starts internally. This is why two people can face the same crisis and produce completely different outcomes. One becomes frantic. The other becomes focused. One adds noise. The other creates direction. The difference isn't intelligence, it's decision. Deciding your state is an act of identity. You're telling yourself, this is who I am under pressure. And every time you reinforce that decision, it becomes easier to access again. Over time, you don't have to think about it. Your default becomes steadiness. Your baseline becomes clarity. Stress stops hijacking you because it no longer surprises your system. This is also why powerful people seem unshakable. It's not because they don't care. It's because they've trained themselves to choose their response before emotion takes over. They don't ask, how do I feel? They ask, who do I choose to be right now? That question changes everything. Because identity is stronger than emotion. When you decide who you are, your feelings eventually align. And when they don't, you move anyway. This is how momentum is built. This is how confidence is earned. This is how calm becomes durable. And here's what happens when you live this way. Stress stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes a cue, a reminder to step into the state you've chosen. Pressure no longer pushes you off center. It pulls you into alignment. You don't rise and fall with circumstances anymore. You remain anchored. That's power. Not power over others, power over yourself. And the person who can decide their state in any situation has something most people are still chasing: freedom. Now, here's where the transformation becomes visible. Not just to you, but to everyone around you. When you learn to act as if nothing stresses you, you're not just managing emotion. You're reclaiming authority over your life. And authority is something most people have unknowingly given away. Think about how often stress decides your behavior. It dictates your tone, your patience, your posture. It decides whether you speak up or stay silent, whether you lead or retreat, whether you stay present or mentally escape. Every time stress runs the moment, it quietly takes power from you. But when you act unstressed, even before you feel unstressed, you take that power back. Because authority is not granted by circumstances. It's projected through presence. People don't follow the most frantic person in the room. They don't trust the one who looks overwhelmed. They respond to the person who appears centered, deliberate, and self-directed, the one who isn't rushed by urgency or rattled by pressure. That person doesn't just feel different, they move differently. They pause before they speak. They listen fully. They respond instead of reacting. And in doing so, they set the emotional temperature for the entire environment. This is something most people never realize. The calmest person in the room is often the most powerful, not because they're dominant, but because they're anchored. When you act as if nothing stresses you, you send a message to your nervous system and to the world at the same time. Internally, you're saying, I trust myself. Externally, you're saying, I am not controlled by this moment. That combination is magnetic. And here's the deeper truth. Authority is not about controlling others. It's about not being controlled by them, not by their moods, not by their expectations, not by their reactions. When someone criticizes you and you remain grounded, you keep your authority. When plans change and you adapt without frustration, you keep your authority. When pressure rises and you slow down instead of speeding up, you keep your authority. Most people lose power, not because life is hard, but because they leak it emotionally. They hand it over through stress, defensiveness, impatience, and overwhelm. Acting unstressed plugs those leaks, and the more consistently you do it, the more natural it becomes. At first, it's intentional. You remind yourself to breathe, to slow your movements, to soften your face, to choose your words. But over time, something remarkable happens. Calm becomes your default. Presence becomes automatic. Authority becomes embodied. You're no longer performing calm, you're living from it. This is where confidence deepens. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind. The quiet, unshakable kind that comes from knowing you can handle whatever comes next. And that changes how you experience life. Challenges don't disappear, but they stop feeling personal. Pressure doesn't vanish, but it stops feeling threatening. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what's required now? That shift alone frees enormous energy. Because when you're not busy being stressed, you're available. Available to think clearly, to see options, to connect, to lead. And leadership shows up in everyday moments. How you handle delays, how you navigate conflict, how you make decisions under uncertainty. Each moment becomes an opportunity to reinforce who's in charge. You are not your emotions, not the situation, not other people's reactions. You. This is why acting as if nothing stresses you is not about numbing yourself or disengaging from life. It's about engaging from a position of strength. It's about meeting intensity with intention instead of impulse. And when you live this way long enough, stress loses its identity. It stops being something you deal with and becomes something you move through without resistance. You don't carry it. You don't dwell on it. You don't let it define you. You act, you adjust, you continue. That's real resilience. And here's the final realization that ties everything together. The moment you stop advertising stress through your body, your voice, and your behavior, life stops treating you like someone who's overwhelmed. People respect you more, they trust you more, they give you space to lead. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. So when pressure shows up, don't ask how stressed you feel. Ask who you choose to be. Stand like someone who can handle it. Breathe like someone who's in control. Move like someone who decides their life. Because the person who acts unstressed doesn't just survive pressure, they command it.